turned on the recording. Okay, let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for the Sabbath that's coming and for all your blessings that you've given us as you've worked in our lives over the past years in many ways that we don't even know. And we just ask, Lord, that you can continue this work that you've begun in us. We pray for each person who's watching this video, who's studying for truth. We ask that your Holy Spirit can touch their hearts and minds. We can understand truth, not just for ourselves, but for others. We pray for those that we minister to each day. We know, Lord, that you have gone before with your angels and that your Holy Spirit has been working upon hearts. And we just ask, Lord, that you can continue to do this work. Be with us in the study here this evening. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So this paper that we're going to go through is, people could go through it on their own, I guess. It's nice, though, if you have questions or things don't make sense. And it's also good for me to go through a paper just from a logistics point of view, understanding how the paper's laid out, whether everything makes sense. So I'm going to start, I'll just start reading here. But the main point here is that I'm trying to write, because somebody asked the question who I was writing this to, and definitely we're writing this to Seventh-day Adventists, but I gave this to a non-Adventist who's interested in it. He doesn't maybe understand everything, but he's interested in the calendars and the dates, and I've talked to him about July 18, 2020 for over a year now, and so he knows about those types of things. So there's obviously lots of other people who would be interested in this. In the fall of 2018, there were a series of predictions that were made by various individuals in the Present Truth movement. These predictions were introduced under the false premise that time setting was now allowed based upon a dispensational argument. The author has argued that we cannot know the definite time for the second coming, the close of probation, the loud cry, or the outpouring of the latter rain, as clearly stated by the spirit of prophecy. We are not to know the definite time either for the outpouring of the Holy Spirit or for the coming of Christ. Why has God not given us this knowledge? Because we would not make a right use of it if he did. A condition of things would result from this knowledge among our people that would greatly retard the work of God in preparing a people to stand in the great day that is to come. We are not to live upon time excitement. You will not be able to say that he will come in 1, 2, or 5 years. Neither are you to put off his coming by stating that it may not be for 10 or 20 years. Many who call themselves Adventists have been time setters. Time after time has been set for Christ to come, but repeated failures have been the result. The definite time of our Lord's coming is declared to be beyond the ken of mortals. Even the angels, who minister unto those who shall be the heirs of salvation, know not the day nor the hour, but of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But the day and hour of his coming Christ is not revealed. He stated plainly to his disciples that he himself could not make known the day or the hour of his second appearing. Had he been at liberty to reveal this, why need he have exhorted them to maintain an attitude of constant expectancy? There are those who claim to know the very day and hour of our Lord's appearing. Very earnest are they in mapping out the future. But the Lord has warned them off the ground they occupy. The exact time of the second coming of the Son of Man is God's mystery. We are nearing the great day of God. The signs are fulfilling, and yet we have no message to tell us of the day and hour of Christ's appearing. The Lord has wisely concealed this from us, that we may always be in a state of expectancy and preparation for the second appearing of our Lord Jesus Christ in the clouds of heaven. So those are Ellen White's statements from various places: Review and Herald, Testimonies for the Church, Desire of Ages, and Letter 28, 1897. So I comment on this, I say, if this is so clearly stated in inspiration, why do we even speak of a time prediction for July 18, 2020? Should not the preaching of time for any event be included in this warning against definite time? First, every statement we have been able to examine places the prohibition of the setting of dates for events connected to the second coming. The author has opposed at every turn any suggestion that we can know the time of events that inspiration says we cannot. However, we do not see the statements of Sister White as a blanket statement regarding time in general. If it were, we could not know when the time is near. Her statement that you will not be able to say that he will come in 1, 2, or 5 years, neither are you to put off his coming by stating it may not be for 10 or 20 years, would be meaningless if this were the case. How can watching have any meaning if anything we see cannot tell us anything about the nearness of his coming? Further, the events that we are examining do not tell us how soon Jesus will come. July 18, 2020 is an event regarding Islam. We know of no connection. Let's take a second here. We know of no connection between this event and the timing of the second coming that undoes Sister White's statement. Even if we are correct as to the time in regard to the attack on the USA by Islam, we still have no way of relating this to the timing of Jesus coming. Second, the author has never sought to set dates. He has only sought to understand the chronology of the Bible as it relates to fulfilled prophecy. This chronology witnessed to the significance of the November 9th, 2019 prediction. This prediction, though false as regarding the events, was seen to be connected to the chronology of Ezekiel, Revelation 9, and Millerite history. As these connections were examined further, it seemed evident that God was the one behind the date. His providence used chronology as a witness against this false movement. We have continued to examine these connections, but are uncertain as to their meaning. This paper is a further example of an examination of these connections. Our mind is still open. The reader needs to examine these evidences for themselves. The structure of the predictions will not be laid out in full, as this would require hundreds of pages. However, we will examine here the basic structure of the 777 chiasm and how this relates to the July 18, 2020 prediction. We know that the probability of the coincidence of dates could not be random. It is mathematically impossible to have occurred by chance. The complete significance of the dates, however, we will not see until after the passing of the time. So, in trying to relate this to people, one of the things is, I've dealt with a lot of people who have argued that that we're time setting, and I've made this argument again and again that we have this time. What it means we're not certain of, but we know that it's not coincidence, it's not chance. It shows design. And so that's, to me, it's very important to put that up front in talking to people about these dates. That we're not trying to predict when Jesus is coming back. We're not trying to predict the events that Ellen White talks about. We're trying to basically understand what has happened, because something has happened that has been out of my control. It's not something I planned or tried to do. It's just a matter of studying and finding these connections. So this next part is this study on the two Lamechs. And there's some important points that I'm laying down as I'm going through this. So I talk about this. Our first encounter with the symbolic representation of 777 is seen in Lamech's age when he died. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. Genesis 5:31. We can see even greater significance once we read of that other Lamech who calls for a curse 70 times worse than that of the curse of Cain. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. So that's Lamech, the descendant of Cain, Genesis 4:24. We have shown other places that these two Lamechs are numerically connected to the prophecy of Daniel 9, verse 24 to 27. 70 weeks are 490 years, based on the same formula of 7 times 7 that Lamech, Cain's descendant, suggests as a curse for anyone who would harm him for his crimes. While he applies 70 times 7 as a curse, Jesus suggests it as the number of times that we should forgive. In answers to Peter's question, how oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Jesus' response, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7, Matthew 18, 21 and 22, is demonstrated when he was made a curse for us on the cross. The number 7 is a symbol of perfection and completeness. Christ provided complete forgiveness for sin, and that he was made to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him, 2 Corinthians 5:21. The structure of 70 weeks conceals the number 777 in the relationship of the divisions. The 70 weeks is divided into 3 periods. The first period of 7 weeks is 49 years. The middle period is 62 weeks. The 70th week stands on its own as a period of 7 years, divided in the midst by Jesus' death on the cross in 31 AD. The structure can be represented mathematically as 7 times 7 for the first 7 weeks, plus 62 times 7 for the 62 weeks, and plus 1 times 7, which equals 490. This could be reduced to 49 plus 340, 344, or 434, pardon me, plus 7, which also equals 490. The first and last periods are representative of the Jubilee and the sabbatical cycles of Leviticus 25, respectively. These 3 sevens at the beginning and the end are added to the 62 sevens, or 434 years in the middle. If the first and last period are multiplied, they produce 343 years. That is 7 times 7 times 7 is 343. When this is then added to the middle period, it results in the number 777. In that, 434 plus 343 equals 777. So this is a structure that the 70 weeks has that I think is quite interesting. Now, I try to explain this mathematically. I don't know if I do a very good job of it. But it says this reveals a remarkable structure that exists in the 70 weeks. The whole period, so P, consists of 3 periods, A, B, and C. The first period, A, is the square of the last period. So the first period is 49 years, and the last period is 7 years. So if you square 7, you get 49. So the last period, C, is squared, and that equals A. The product of A times C, or C cubed, when added to the middle period, B, that's the 62 weeks, equals the number X, with digits that are C, C, C. The formula can be written thus: P, that's the period, which is grouped in the set of A, B, and C, equals C times 10C. So that's 7 times 70. It also can be written as C squared, or C cubed, plus B, which equals X. And X will equal C, C, C. So whatever number that you have will produce this. But this is only true if the structure were based on, this would not be true if the structure were based on any other number than 7. So another way to put this formula is n cubed plus n times 10n minus n squared plus n equals X. So I know that could be confusing to people, which equals n is only true if n is 7. And I'm trying to see if this makes sense. Maybe I did something wrong here. So n cubed plus, yeah. So I'm subtracting, so if you put the number 7 in there, it would be 7 cubed plus 7 times 10 times 7, so that would be 490. So 490 minus n squared plus n, so n squared is 49 plus 7, right? So you're going to take that and you subtract it from 490, you would get 434. And you're going to add that 434 to, or 343, pardon me, to 434. So 434 is what's produced by the last part, and 343 is produced by n cubed. And then the answer is x, which in this case would be the number 777, where each of the digits of that number is the same as n. So maybe that's a bad way to explain it. I don't know if everybody's going to follow that, because not everybody's mathematical. But you can see it here in the diagram, of course. You have 7 times 7 at the beginning, and 1 times 7 at the end, and 62 times 7 in the middle. Now, there's a lot more about this structure that I present, dealing with the 3 times 31 times 7, why it's divided that way. So I don't explain that here. But you can see 7 times 7 times 7 is 343. If you add that to the 62 weeks, you get 777. So a very unique structure that the 70 weeks has. So now what I want to do is I want to connect this idea of the 70 weeks and deal with the Lamechs. That's really why I introduced it, because Lamech is important in understanding that he's connected. Both Lamechs are connected with the 7 times, or with the 70 weeks. And they're also connected with the 7 times as well. So July 18, 2020 and Lamech. The prediction for July 18, 2020 has been addressed other places. The July 18, 2020 prediction is attached to 2 other dates. The first is November 9, 2019. The second is 777 days later and is December 25th, 2021. So if anybody has any questions as we go through this, I mean, you can wait a little bit because I might answer it. But if there's something that's not clear, just let me know. The second, so there are 252 days from November 9th, 2019 to July 18, 2020. So you can see that in the diagram there. There's November 9th, there's July 18th. You might have a hard time seeing it, it's very tiny. The understanding of these dates and the structure they form developed over a period of 2 years. Part of the understanding is derived from a period of 777 ordinal days from November 9th, 1989 to December 25th, 1991, which marks the fall of the USSR. So we have marked these dates in the past. November 9th, 1989, that's when the wall came down, the Berlin Wall. And on December 25th, 1991, that's the end of the Soviet Union. The pertinent event in our line is the July 18, 2020 prediction. This date can be understood as 18-7-20, that is the 18th day of the 7th month, the 20th year. It has been noted the gematria for Lamech's name in English, when multiplied, produces 18720. That is, the letter L is the 12th letter of the alphabet, A is the first letter, M is the 13th. And normally you just add these together. That's what people usually do with gematria. So they find a symbolic representation of a name, of what it adds to. But we can see that it actually, if multiplied, comes to the number 18,720, which is July 18th, 2020. Thus, we can connect the period of 777 days with the July 18, 2020 prediction by his name and the number of years he lived. So the number of years he lived is 777 days, but his name produces this number, 18720. And we'll see why that's significant in this study. We can further see the connection between this period of 777 days and July 18 in the ages of Lamech's father and grandfather at the birth of their sons. Enoch was 65 years old when Methuselah was born, and Methuselah was 187 when Lamech was born. That is, Lamech was born when his grandfather Enoch was 252 years of age. The key that unlocked the chronology was the 2520. When commenced at the end of the 65 years of Isaiah 7, verse 7 to 9, the 777 days has 252 as part of its structure as the number of days from November 9th, 2019 to July 18, 2020. The 65 years from the birth of Enoch to the birth of Methuselah comes from the structure of the prophetic mirror, as expressed in the 65-year prophecy of Isaiah 7, verse 8. The further period of 187 years from the birth of Methuselah to the birth of Lamech is a symbol of July 18. So this one's maybe a little bit easier to see. It's not as small a print as the other diagram. So you can see from creation, 4045 BC, to the birth of Enoch is 622 years. Whether you have that date for the day of creation or not, if you count the ages of the patriarchs when they had their children, Enoch is born in 622 AM, or Anno Mundi, in the year of the world. 65 years later, Methuselah is born. And then 187 years after Methuselah is born, Lamech is born. 65 plus 187 equals 252. And then we also see that there's a further 182 years to Noah's birth, which I'm not going to address here. There's a significance in that. It just wasn't in, it's in this diagram, but it's not in the paper. And you can see that Lamech lives 777 years. And Methuselah dies in the year of the flood at 969 years of age. So just very interesting that we have that structure of the 252 and the 777 together in this history. There are two main symbols that were used to derive July 18, 2020. So now I'm going to jump into how we came to July 18, 2020. The use of numbers and dates as symbols came about gradually. It was not something that was looked for, but was simply the result of study. Many Christians recognize that 70 AD, for instance, is a symbol, and that the symbol comes from the period of 70 years for the Babylonian captivity. Many also understand 666 as a symbol, as well as the number 7 for completion or perfection. In 2014, with the opening up of Ezra 7:9, the symbols of the first day of the first month and the first day of the fifth month were recognized. These dates, in 457 BC, are connected with the events, and the same dates in 1844. Places where these occurred in the Bible shed light upon the understanding of these dates in Millerite history. The unfolding has continued in the July 18, 2020 prediction. So many people would recognize these use of numbers as symbols. They often just don't like the way that we use them. So the two symbols, of course, were the 10th day of the fifth month and the 26th day of the fourth month. And so we're going to look at the 10th day of the fifth month. The date July 18, 2020 was first seen using Ezekiel's prophecy of the 490 and 40 days that produced the symbol of the 10th day of the fifth month for the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 B and 70 AD. These periods of 490 days and 40 days, upon which Ezekiel lay upon his left and right side respectively, symbolized 390 and 40 years that commenced with the prophecy of Josiah in 977 BC, and its fulfillment in 927 BC, respectively. So the 390 years begins with the prophecy of Josiah in 977, and the 40 years commence with the fulfillment of that prophecy in 627 BC. Ezekiel marks the 10th day of the fifth month by the last day that he lays on his left side, and by his third vision in the 10th day of the fifth month in Ezekiel 20 verse 1. We also noted Ezekiel 2020 as marking the year 2020 with its connection to the sabbatical cycle and the 2520. So I'm going to, we have a diagram here which we will look at, which will help it a bit. So trying to keep these things in your mind, I usually recommend that people draw these things out themselves. It really is helpful. As well, we can see that Ezekiel begins to lie on his left side on July 21st, 592 BC, which is the fifth day of the fourth month. This is the same date in 1844 that Ellen White refers to as midway between the time when it had been first thought that the 2300 days would end, April 18th, 1844, and the autumn of the same year, October 22, 1844. The day that Ezekiel begins to lie on his right side is the date in Millerite history that the midnight cry was empowered. On August 15, 1844, Snow presented his arguments for the prophetic periods to to end on the 10th day of the 7th Jewish month, later seen to be October 22nd, at the Exeter camp meeting, before 5,000 attendants. Since the destruction of Jerusalem is a type of the end of the world, we believe that this will be seen in our history with the same biblical date as seen in 586 BC and 70 AD. So we can see here, this is Ezekiel's literal 390 days and 40 days. I don't have the whole prophecy laid out of the 390 and 40 years. But you can see he starts on the 5th day of the 4th month. For 390 days, he lies on his left side. And the last day that he lies down on his left side is the 10th day of the 5th month. And then the next day, he will begin to lie down on his right side. And that day is August 15th. And he lies on his right side for 40 days. His third vision is given in chapter 20. And in verse 1, it tells us that that's also the 10th day of the 5th month. And we know that the temple was destroyed 4 years later in 586 BC on the 10th day of the 5th month. And again in 70 AD on the 10th day of the 5th month. So that symbol keeps repeating. We also can see that when I originally had chosen 2020, and I looked at the 10th day of the 5th month, it was July 31st. But I noticed it was the Julian date. And since I was dealing with Julian dates here in Ezekiel, these are all Julian dates, August 2nd, August 18th, August 7th, July 21st. These are on the Julian calendar. In our history, we're using the Gregorian. So when I looked at the symbols of the 10th day of the 5th month from Ezekiel, I saw that it lay on the July 18th. And I already had July 18th from Samuel Snow's letters and other places. So it was significant. And there's a whole story of how that unfolded, which I don't have time to go through in this paper. So there's kind of some steps being missed here. But that was the first date that I had. And after I'd had July 18th on the Julian calendar, I then, because I had all these symbols from Revelation 9 that were pointing to November 9th, 2019, I continued to look at Revelation 9 and Josiah Litch's prophecy. So the symbol of the 26th day of the 4th month was derived from Josiah Litch's understanding of the prophecy of Revelation 9. Each waymark from the start of the first woe on July 27th, 1299, leading up to the end of the second woe on August 11th, 1840, is marked by the biblical date of the 26th day of the 4th month. That would be the 26th day of Tammuz, is the name of the month. And it aligns with July 27th on either the Julian or Gregorian calendars. For the years 1809, 1839, and 1840, a prophetic year, month, and day, respectively, from the start of the second woe in 1449, the prophetic events fall on the accordant Gregorian dates that precede the biblical Julian date combination. In 1840, the Gregorian date of July 27 aligns with the biblical date of the 26th day of the 4th month, just as it does in 1449. In 1449, the Julian date that aligns with the 26th day of the 4th month is July 18, 2020. I read that wrong. In 1449, the Julian date that aligns with the 26th of the day of the 4th month is July 18, 2020. And I'm not sure if that is, I should have written the sentence differently because it's kind of confusing. Made sense at the time. So the date in 1849 is July 18th. And that date is the 26th day of the 4th month on the Gregorian calendar in 2020. It's July 18th. So I maybe should correct that sentence to make it more clear. While the Gregorian date of July 27 aligns with the biblical date of the 26th day of the 4th month in 1840, the event again precedes the biblical date by 12 days. July 15th Gregorian is the date that the ultimatum is issued by the signing of the Convention of London, which is delivered to the Pasha, Muhammad Ali, on August 11th, 1840. So the diagram explains a little bit better. If we go at the beginning of the diagram, we can see we have July 27th, 1299, and that's a Julian date, July 27th. It's the 26th day of the 4th month. Now, I probably should have kept the Julian dates at the bottom and put like the Gregorian date, August 3rd, at the top, but I didn't even put it in there. But if you count from July 27th, 1299 to July 27th, 1449, in order to keep the symbol of the 26th day of the 4th month, you would need to use the Gregorian date of July 27th. Now below it, you see July 28 Julian is the 26th day of the 4th month. And that's because at that time, in 1449, those are 9 days apart. The calendars are 9 days apart. Because if you go from 18 and you add 9 to 18, you'd get 27. So the Julian calendar is 9 days behind. But the 26th day of the 4th month lines up with both of those dates. Now, if you count a year in prophetic time, you come to July 27th, 1809. Now, that's a Gregorian date. So you could look at that date on the Gregorian calendar counting from July 27th. But if you look at the biblical date, it's actually 12 days later. And that's July 27th, 1809 is the 26th day of the 4th month. And July 27th, in this case, is a Julian date. But on the Gregorian date is when the event is actually fulfilled. The Treaty of Dardanelles is signed on July 27th, 1809. So the symbol is on the Julian date, the biblical date symbol, and it lines up with the Julian date, July 27th. But the event is fulfilled 12 days earlier on the Gregorian calendar. The same thing happens with the collective note. The collective note is 30 years later, and this collective note is what leads to the Convention of London, which is when the ultimatum is signed. And so on July 27th, 1839, the collective note is signed on the Gregorian calendar. But the 26th day of the 4th month lines up with the Julian calendar in 1839. So July 27th has 2 dates in that history, just like we have 2 July 18ths in 2020, a Julian or Gregorian date. And then if we go a year later, we come to the Convention of London. Convention of London is July 15th, 1840. And you'll see that the Julian date lines up with July 15th in 1840, as the 26th day of the 4th month is the Julian date, July 15th. But the event that is being fulfilled is on July 15th, Gregorian, not on July 15th, Julian. But the interesting thing here is that the 26th day of the 4th month also lines up with July 27th, Gregorian. And so we have basically a triple combination or something of how these dates are aligning. And it's from July 27th, 1840 Gregorian that Josiah Litch counted the 15 days to August 11th, 1840. And that, of course, would be the Julian date, July 30th. Now, you can see there's this 0.5 years, which we converted into prophetic time, and we counted 180 years. It's me and Stephen, to July 18th Gregorian, which is the 26th day of the 4th month. So you can see those 2 dates there. The 26th day of the 4th month is July 18th Gregorian, and the 10th day of the 5th month is July 18th Julian. So it follows it 13 days later. So a very interesting coincidence, something that really was very remarkable prophetically, that something like this could happen, that you could have these events. And these are the events that are recognized. So we didn't cherry pick and say, well, let's find some dates that are going to somehow have, be July 27th and something happens on them. These are the dates in history that are marked: the Treaty of Dardanelles, the Collective Note, the Convention of London, which is delivered as the ultimatum on August 11th, 1840. So it's just remarkable that we have this coincidence of dates. Now, in the study of Samuel Snow's letters, I have them laid out here. Now, I know that this is a simplified, I have some other diagrams that are a little more complicated than this. And excuse me here, I feel like I need to sneeze, but so Samuel Snow's letters in 1844, there are 4 letters. Now I have here, I'm not sure why I have that number 5 here. It should be 1, 2, 3, 4. For some reason, my numbers are wrong on that diagram. I'm going to have to correct it. Didn't notice that. Because his second letter, it says 3, but it's his second letter. So the numbers don't line up. I'm going to have to fix that problem. Okay, so his first letter is February 16th, and it's published in the Midnight Cry February 22nd, and in Himes Signs of the Times on April 3rd. So it has 2 publication dates. And his second letter, we don't know when it was written, but it was published on May 2nd, 1844. His third letter is June 22nd, and that was published in the Midnight Cry June 27th. Now it's interesting, if you take June 27th and you look at the biblical date, it's the 11th day of the 3rd month. And that letter was written on the biblical date of the 6th day of the 3rd month, which is Pentecost. But if you take the 11th day of the 3rd month, the day that it was published, and you double it, you get the 22nd day of the 6th month. And that's the date that it was written on the Gregorian calendar, June 22nd. And then finally his fourth letter, which was written on June 29th. So it was written quite a bit before it was published, in the Midnight Cry on July 18th, 1844. And that was published 3 days before midnight, 3 days before July 21st, which is the 5th day of the 4th month. So it was published on the 2nd day of the 4th month. And June 29th in 457 BC is the 6th day of the 3rd month. So it's a symbol of Pentecost. And so there's this connection between these letters and Pentecost. Now, he also has 3 other papers that are written after midnight. One's called Prophetic Chronology, and that's published on August 8th, 1844, and August 22nd, 1844. I think it was written actually August 8th, 1844, published on August 22nd. And people get confused because the True Midnight Cry, the paper that was published on August 22nd, 1844, and also October 4th, 1844, that paper, The True Midnight Cry, because they carry the same date, many people just assumed when they would see this August 22nd Prophetic Chronology article that it was actually just the same article as The True Midnight Cry. And then he published a later one on September, part 2, I guess you might call it, of Prophetic Chronology, on September 6th, 1844. Or he wrote it, and it was published on September 19th in the Midnight Cry. And it's interesting about these 2 articles, Prophetic Chronology. You see it actually early on in Snow. Snow is a fanatic. That is, he's fanatical. And this, of course, comes to light as after the passing of time, October 22nd, 1844. But he believed himself to be a prophet long before the disappointment. And, and it's something that, we all have to be cautious about, just because we have insight into God's word that God has revealed to us, doesn't make us a prophet. And not in the way that people would think. Obviously, anybody who proclaims God's word in a certain sense is a prophet or messenger. But we're not talking about that. He thought he was Elijah. And you can see some of his errors in these 2 articles on prophetic chronology. Errors that he continues to build upon after 1844 when he's promoting himself. And a very deceptive person, was not, not somebody you wouldn't want to be, labeled as Samuel Snow because he goes off into apostasy. But he had fanatical ideas from the beginning. Now, the 187 and 457 in 1844, this just has to do with this, and I wanted to show this coincidence where you take the dates that we have, which we had developed by 2016, the 1st day of the 1st month, the 5th day of the 4th month, the 1st day of the 5th month, August 15th, and the 10th day of the 7th month, October 22nd. So we had April 19th, July 21st, August 15th, October 22nd. Now, when we look at the biblical dates and we add them together, so we just take them as the numbers The first day of the first month would be 11. Fifth day of the fourth month would be 54. First day of the fifth month would be 15, and the 10th day of the seventh month, which would be 107. If you add them together, they come to 187. And it's 187 days from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the seventh month. This is one way we can confirm that the lines that were given to us in 2016, that's when we had these waymarks, are correct. But we can also see this in 457 BC. The dates that are given in the book of Ezra are the first day of the first month, the 12th day of the first month, first day of the fifth month, the 20th day of the ninth month, and the first day of the 10th month. Those are the years that are given in 457 BC. Now, in this case, we take away the zeros, and we can do that because the zero is just a placeholder, and we add them together. 11 for the first day of the first month, 121 for the 12th day of the first month, 15 for the first day of the fifth month, and then 29 for the 20th day of the ninth month. We're taking up the zero. And the same with the first day of the 10th month. We take it as the number 11. If you add those numbers together, you get 187 as well. So it shows a connection between 1844 and 457 BC. And this method we've used in adding dates together, we do it in the Levitical chiasm, or the midnight chiasm, pardon me, which we're going to look at next. So is everybody following this, or am I being too monotonous and too boring to listen to?
I'm following it
Okay.
pretty well, I think.
Okay, good. And you know, if you have questions, don't be shy about asking them. So
No, on one of your videos, you said he has a fifth letter that ends in a December date. Is that true?
in Samuel Snow's letters, there's a fifth. You're talking about Samuel Snow's other letter, which I took out.
Yeah.
It's his May 1st letter. Now, it doesn't connect as part of his letters in the sense that it's not talking about anything about predicting. It's just a letter that he wrote to the editor and it's published in the Signs. So it's not in the Midnight Cry, because the Signs is published on Wednesdays and the Midnight Cry on Thursdays. So that's why it was published on May 1st. And he's just talking about the mockers who had mocked them. So it's not really dealing with the prediction before midnight, right? So it's not dealing with the events that he's talking about, which is why they published it in the Signs. It was something, just a general sort of letter. But there is that fifth letter. And I do think it's significant, just not part of the structure of his letters. It can be added in the structure in a certain way, but it's just not as pertinent. But it is in the Three Angels Messages source book. You can read that letter. So it's the Midnight Cry letters. All the letters that were published in the Midnight Cry are the ones we're using as Samuel Snow's letters, not just a letter to the editor that was just a general sort of letter. Okay, so the Midnight Chiasm. So we know in April of 2020, Jeff Pippinger recognized a structure relating to the November 9th, 2019 prediction. This he labeled as the Midnight Chiasm. This was an extension of an earlier structure that was now completed, and we'll take a bit of an explanation. So I'm basically going into the prediction of how things unfolded in regard to November 9th. On October 3rd, 2018, Tess Lambert, in 2 studies entitled 10 Years in the Midnight Cry, made a prediction that probation would close for the line of the priest on November 9th, 2019. This date was affirmed 10 days later on October 13th, when the author counted 391.5 days from noon, October 13, 2018, to midnight commencing November 9th, 2019. This prediction was touted as the Midnight Cry for the priests, paralleling August 15, 1844. November 9th, 2019 was then seen as midnight for the Levites. A brother Daniel from Brazil had made a prediction regarding the date October 13th on July 27th. So on July 27th, 2018, he made this prediction. he told us during the Wednesday prayer meeting on the evening of October 3rd that he had expected Parminder Bryant to present the Midnight Cry on October 13th at Lambert Church. However, he had found that he was the one to give the sermon and was disappointed that the prediction was already made earlier that day by Tess Lambert. At noon on October 13th, the author was in attendance. While listening to the message regarding November 9th, 2019, he made a calculation of the number of days from noon, October 13th, 2018 to November 9th, 2019, and found it was 391.5 days. The coincidence of Daniel's July 27th prediction regarding October 13th and the 391 days, both symbols in Revelation 9, so the July 27th is, and the Revelation and the 391 days are symbols in Revelation 9, as understood by Josiah Litch, brought together several lines of prophecy. These the author worked out over the next few weeks to arrive at the July 18, 2020 prediction regarding an attack on Islam on the USA by Islam. The structure was then drawn up and looked like this. So we see there the June 9th is where he counted the 126 days from. And he made this prediction, he counted those days on July 27th. Now, little did he realize that from June 9th to noon, October 13th, was a period, he knew it was a period of 126 days, but he didn't realize the center of it was August 11th, which is very significant in the context of Josiah Litch's prophecy. Now, I had looked at the 120 days because I understood 391 and a half days represents 391 and a half years. And that's the number of years of the United Kingdom of Israel under Saul, David, and Solomon, which precedes the 391 years of the divided kingdom. So the 120 days and 391.5 years, to me, were something I'd found in chronology of the kings of Judah. The second day of the fourth month is the rabbinic date and is the same biblical date for Samuel Snow's July 18 letter in 1844. So when I counted back 120 days, I came to the rabbinic date of the second day of the fourth month. It was June 15th. So I had this June 15th date. When the date July 18, 2020 Julian was first discovered, another amazing coincidence was also seen in this structure. When we counted back from July 18, 2020, 391.5 days, we arrived at June 22nd, 2019, which was the date of Snow's third Pentecost letter. As we kept looking back, we realized that the structure of the prediction was the same as the structure of Snow's letters, revealing a hidden chiasm in his letters. The only differences are the addition of 1 year between June 22nd and July 18, and that the count is sometimes ordinal and sometimes cardinal. So I lay them out here, and so we look at above, we see Samuel Snow's letters again. His first letter is February 16th, it's written. It's published on February 22nd in the Midnight Cry. It's republished on April 3rd in the Signs. Now, these dates are all very significant, which I'm not going to go into here too much, except to see that April 3rd is it's the Passover that was kept by the Jews in 1840. His second letter was May 2nd, and that's the correct Passover according to the calendar that the Millerites were using. April 19th is the center of this chiasm, with June 22nd at the end of it. So we can see that June 22nd, which is a symbol of this movement, lines up with October 13th, 2018. And this is the actual prediction of Daniel's that he made, Daniel from Brazil. The 126 days, the 120 days that I recognized, and then the 391.5 days going to November 9th. So these line up in the same pattern, in the same way. You have 6 days at the beginning. You have the 126 days divided into 2 periods of 63. If I take August 11th and I look at the Julian date, it's 13 days after August 11th, the Gregorian date. And that lines up with April 19th and May 2nd. So when I was drawing this out on the board, Jeff saw it because he had been presenting Samuel Snow's letters, and he was just amazed because this was this chiasm that we had just experienced, we had just talked about, and now here it was in Samuel Snow's letters, these identical structures. Something that is mathematically almost impossible to calculate. It's so complex to try to decide what the parameters are, how something like this could occur by chance. It definitely couldn't occur by chance. So this was a strong testimony the July 18 prediction was true, and that it lines up in a sense with the November 9th prediction as part of the same message. Now, some people have made an argument that these are tidings out of the east and tidings out of the north. The October 13th date is, of course, based upon the message dealing with the papacy, because that was the date of October 13th at noon of the miracle of Fatima. But also you can see Josiah Litch's prophecy mixed in there. But you can see definitely as we apply it, July 18th is a message regarding the East, tidings out of the East, which is Islam. So this message about the papacy and the message about Islam is tidings out of the North and the East. That's the way it was understood. And that's the midnight cry. It requires both messages. Now, more structure unfolded as we pass through the various events. So this is an important part. And I'm not sure if everybody understands about September 7th, 2019. But this to me was when Jeff was presenting at Lambert Church. It's the last sermon that was done at Lambert Church, the calling out the apostasy that had arisen. I was in Warburg, and I was doing this calculation, watching him on my iPhone, listening to him a little bit. And I noticed that it was 63 days to November 9th. And September 7th is the date 9/7. 9 times 7 can produce 63. As well, it was 329 days since the calculation was made on October 13th. So I'd been in Lambert Church on October 13th, making that calculation 329 days before. Now I'm watching the last sermon at Lambert Church on September 7th and making this calculation. Now what I noticed is that the center of this was March 27th, 2019. And at first I didn't know what it meant. I knew that it was a symbol of the Levites, 27th day of the third month, 273. But we're going to address that a bit later. Now, Jeff understood that he could count another 63 days from November 9th to January 11th, 2020. And he figured this out later on, a couple months after that. But he had marked this date in his mind as significant because that's where he recognized what the message was to be given to the Levites. And he began then to present that message in a series of presentations, which so far is up to 45. It was clearly seen that this message was the message regarding the increase of light in regard to the repeat of Daniel 11. This completed a structural chiasm that pointed to March 27th, 2021, a symbol for the message to the Levites, which we will address later. So I'm going to go into that a bit more later. But you can see here, we have the June 9th, August 11th, October 13th on the left. And then we have the 329 days. The center of it is March 27th, 2019. And because I'm counting noon October 13th and noon September 7th, I'm being very precise in marking the middle. Now the middle is not March 27th at noon. It's at midnight commencing March 27th. And so that's 164.5 days and another 164.5 days. So there's two groups of 164.5 days. You add them together, it's 329 days. Now you can see from September 7th, there is that 63 days to November 9th and the 63 days again to January 11th. Now, we also are marking March 27th, 2021. And so Jeff had noticed it was 63 weeks. So he's taking that 63 as a symbol and he's extending it to March 27th. Now he had done this on the whiteboard in the class. And I think it was Odilio who noticed that if you added the dates, and Jeff had written the dates not as September 7th like I did above, he had written them as 9/7, 11/9, and 1/11. And Odilio, of course, noticed that if you added them together, they would equal 327, which is in the American style of writing them, the month and the day. The third month, the 27th day, just like he did the 9th month, the 7th day, the 11th month, the 9th day, the first month, the 11th day. Then I noticed that if you inverted them, and you do it like a Canadian would or a European, Canadians sometimes do the American way too. If we write it as words, we do it that way. If we write it as numbers, we do it like the Europeans. At least we're supposed to. But I found that if you added 79 plus 911 plus 111, you would get 1,101. And of course, you could write that as 11, 1. So when you use the European style, you get the starting point of the 63 weeks from January 11th. And if you use the American style, you get the end date of the 73 or 63 weeks to March 27th, 2021. So something that is extremely unlikely. And it's a use similar to what we did with 1844, the first day of the 5th month to the 10th day of the 7th month. So very interesting point. The validity of this structure has been attested to by many observations as to its unlikeliness. First, it was noticed that the dates September 7th, November 9th, and January 11th, when written as American dates. So I explain all this. The other thing is when you count from the beginning of this chiasm, June 9th, all the way to March 27th, 2021, the number of days is 1,022 days. And 1,022 can represent October 22 in 1844. So it can represent that. So we see some symbols just even in the number of days of the entire structure. Now, so we have the midnight chiasm and we have the Levitical chiasm. Now, these two are going to come together in an amazing way. And you can see they're already connected in that midnight chiasm. We have that March 27th, 2019, and the March 27th, 2021. So we have these two dates. Now remember, March 27th, 2021 is part of the 777 structure. So I'm just gonna, just for the benefit of people to see this, I'm gonna draw this. So we know that we have this 777 structure. We have December 25th, 2021. We have November 9th, 2019. We have 252 days to July 18th, 2020. And then we have another 252 days to March 27th, 2021. And this is a symbol of 273, which is, this is 273 days to December 25th, 2021. So the fact that we have this March 27th, we've had it for a while. And I had noticed the March 27th over here as part of this Levitical chiasm, which is, you got these 63 days here, 63. This goes to that January 11th, 111, 11/9, and well, we'll just put here, September 7th. So this chiasm here, we'll put the 63 down here, right? So there's your November 9th. But from here to October 13th, we got August 11th, and we have June 9th over here. So these are 63 days, these are 63 days. And then we have from here to here, from this September 7th, 329 days. And in the center here, we have March 27th, 2019. So we got these two March 27ths. But we found that there's a center here, which is also a March 27th. Of course, it's going to be the center, 2020. And this becomes an important structure and an important date. So hopefully that kind of breaks up the monotony of me reading a little bit, not much, but a little. So So the main thing that we noticed on March 27th, 2020 was that the Seventh-day Adventist Church began 100 days of prayer that would end on July 4th, 2020. And this was a response to the pandemic. The quarantine and lockdowns opened the door to present this message to Seventh-day Adventists. So we saw that this symbol of March 27th is about a message to the Levites, and that it's at the center of this chiasm on March 20th that the Adventist Church now is praying regarding this pandemic, but the type of people who would be praying about it are the type of people who would be open to light. These are people who are serious students. And we also have this opportunity then to present a message on, because the churches are closed down, present a message on YouTube and online in different ways. We've had a lot more opportunity to present the message to Adventists since they're not regularly going to church and they're looking around for other things. And of course, they're in a state where there's this pandemic and you're wondering what's happening, is the world ending? And so people are a little bit more open. So the 27th day of the third month can be understood as 273. The number 273 was first seen in the study of Acts 27. Now, I'm not going to go through and explain this here right now, but we know that in Acts 27, we had the 273 symbol, and in Numbers 3, we have the 273 symbol. So this explains it here. I don't want to take up your time explaining this because we should know this. But it is explained. Here's something that's a typo, and I need to correct. Now, if we, so I'm just going to go ahead here. So if we now apply a similar type of mathematical analysis, that's going to deal with the fact that we can find the symbol of the 2520 and the symbol of the 1260 in Numbers and Acts. So I'm just not going to go through that right now. It's not that important to what we're going to talk about, but it is important for people needing that background information. We also, we see this also in the July 18, 2020 prediction. We found that when we counted 252 days from November 9th, so I've shown you all that already. And if you take the date, July 18, 20, and you multiply 7 times 18 by 20, you get the number 252. You can also just take 18 times 7, July 18, that equals 126. So you have these symbols of the 2520 in the July 18 prediction. Now, if we see the date as 18/7/20, we can multiply this, as I said, 18 times 7 times 20 to arrive at 2520. Now, if we count the further 252 days, it brings us to March 27th, 2021, which is the 27th day of the third month, or 273, just like I showed you when I wrote it up there. So as we noted, the center of the chiasm, the Levitical chiasm, is March 27th, 2019. And we know that the midnight chiasm ties to March 27th, 2021 with the 63 weeks. Now, if you count the period of days, it's 731 days. And 731 is a symbol for July 31. It's also in the center of the 62 weeks, which can be seen as 31 times 7 plus 31 times 7. So there's a lot of symbolism there. July 31st Gregorian is July 18th Julian in the year 2020. So I mentioned that 731 is the symbol of the midst of the week as well, that Jesus was crucified in 31 AD in the midst of the 70th week. So in the midst of the week, 731. It's also a symbol for Christ. So I have this all drawn out, what I had drawn out before, except this didn't have all the details that I had in the other diagram, because I'm going to show the other diagram later. But you can see some of the dates there. It'll probably take time to look at it. There are many symbols employed in the above structure. The 777 days ends on December 25th, 2021. The biblical date for December 25th, 2021 on the biblical calendar is the 20th day of the 9th month. Now, the 20th day of the 9th month is found in Ezra 10:9 and is the end of the structural chiasm that has the 10th day of the 7th month in 457 BC as its center. So I didn't actually go through that. There's a whole study on that. As we will see, the 25th day of the 12th month, the Gregorian date, is also significant. As noted earlier, March 27, 2020 began a period of 100 days of prayer. That's an ordinal count for Seventh-day Adventist Church that ends on July 4th. From March 27th to July 31st is 2020 is 126 days. So there are many more symbols that could be brought out, but these will suffice for the present purposes. There's lots of symbols, lots of things I leave out in this paper. Now, this is really the body of this paper. A lot of that was background information. And I have done the presentation on the Mayan calendar before. Not everybody has seen it, but the video is up there for people who do want to see it. Now, the Mayan calendar has so many connections to our lines that it cannot be fully addressed here. We refer you to the author's paper, The Mayan Calendar in July 18, 2020. And even that paper doesn't really touch everything. So I'm going to just try to, instead of going through here, just explain it like I've explained it before. It's probably a little bit better than me reading it. So I'll stop the sharing. And so I know some people have seen this, but it definitely helps because I don't think it sticks in everybody's mind. But we have this Mayan calendar, and it's going to start way back here on if you used a Gregorian date, it would be August 11th, 3113 minus 3113. So this would actually be September 6th, 3114 BC. That is, when you use Gregorian dates in the past like this and use a minus sign, it means they use a 0 year. But when you use a BC date where you're doing an ordinal count and we don't use a 0 year, plus at this time, the Julian and the Gregorian are quite far apart and that long ago. So August 11th and September 6th, they're nearly a month apart. Now, interesting thing about this, if you read this date, which I originally did, as a Julian date, because I thought when I read it in a book, the author thought it was a Julian date. August 11th, 3113 BC is the 26th day of the 4th month. But if I read it correctly, August 11th, 3114 BC, doing it properly, it would be the 10th day of the 5th month. So in this Julian and Gregorian sort of representation of these dates, we find that the biblical calendar yields the two symbols that we had for Islam. So that was the first indication to me that the Mayan calendar had significance. Now, I'm just going to go over to here. So this is going to be the date the world was supposed to end. This is December 21st, 2012. And December 21st, 2012 is this false prediction that the world's going to end. There's lots of different groups that were making predictions using this date. Some were New Age groups, but even some Christian groups kind of adopted this for some reason. I don't understand why, because this is, a pagan calendar. It shouldn't be used in prophecy. However, God is talking about the world, and this is prophecy about the end of the world, and all these different calendars seem to come into play in this prediction. Now, in these dates, when you see them represented, the day before, December 20th, was this date. That is, these are placeholders for a base 20 system, and they count from right to left. So this would represent 19 days. This number here, 17, would be 17 times 20 days, right? And then you would take this one here, this 19 by itself would represent 19 times 360 days. And this would be 19 times 7,200. And this would be 12 times 144,000. So this number is a placeholder for, it goes up to 144,000. So that, if that makes sense. So this is the day before. And so when the calendar changed to December 21st, this would go to 20, which means this would go to 0. You would carry the 1, and the 1 would be added to the 17, which would then go to 18, and 18 is as high as it goes, so then you would go to 0, and you would carry the 1, and this would turn to 20, and you'd carry the 1. This would go to 0, you carry the 1, you add it to here, this would go to 20, you go to 0, you carry the 1, and then you would get this date. So, you know, very significant type of date and how you count this. It's actually a really easy calendar to use once you understand it. You can easily count between dates and look at these numbers and know how far it is from this date or how far it is from any date, because you can just add them up. Which it's harder to do with our calendar, to figure out how many days between a different date. So a day count calendar is obviously easier to do that. So this date here, December 21st, 2012, became important. Now, we're going to, and when you look at this date, the interesting thing about it too, is since this is 13 times 144,000, if you take 144,000 and you multiply it by 13, you'll get this number, 1,872,000. And you can see in here, if you just look at this part, this is our July 18, 2020, which we had with Lamech's name, the 18720. So you can see that this is a fraction of this. This is 100 times greater than this. So very interesting that this date here, and somebody asked me, is this the 14th back tomb or the 13th back tomb that began on December 12th or December 21st, 2012? And the answer to this would be, it's like a birthday. When you turn 1, you've already lived a year of life. So when you're 1 year old, this would be like being 13 back tombs old. And so you're continuing to count until you get to 14 back tombs. And that's going to be another 144,000 days that you'd have to wait to be 14 back tombs old. So this is the end of the count of 13 back tombs, but it's marking what we call the 13th back tomb. First back tomb would be the 0 back tomb. It's just where you're starting with 0 here. So that's the way I understand it. Whether it's the best explanation or it's exactly how the Mayans thought of it, it's hard to say. They just understood these, one as symbols and numbers. They used the symbol system to count these. So we have the symbolism in the Mayan calendar that deals with the prediction, the July 18th prediction here at the beginning and the July 18th prediction here at the end. Now, I'm going to kind of skip a lot of this stuff because I don't want to keep everybody, for a couple hours. So the rest of the paper, I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to explain, drawing it here on the whiteboard. Now, we know we have over here December 25th, 2021. And we have this structure. I guess I'll do it this way. We have 273 days, so that's the March 27th, 2021. And we have July 18th, 2020. It's just 4 weeks away now. And then we got November 9th, 2019. So you got these periods of 252 days, 252 days. And this is a whole period of 777 days. I'm probably not going to have enough room to do all this, but so I'm going to move this over. And I'm just going to make this, so I'm getting rid of this beginning here, just so we have more space. So I'm going to move this over to here, 13,000,000, December 21st, 2012. And just look at my notes here. Now there's a section here that I'm not going to address completely, but I do want to address one point, is that there's a date over here that's within this structure that most people don't know about, and it's this date, November 15th. November 15th, 2019. Now, I was at the School of the Prophets on November 9th, actually presented there on the symbol of the 273. So I did 2 presentations while I was there on the number 273. And we had decided, I don't know if it really got on video or not, but that November 15th marked a period of 7 days from November 9th. This week, this period of time in which people had to repent. We would look at it like when Noah is on the ark, so to speak, even though the door has closed, nobody repents. And of course, nobody repents here in this period. And so we kind of look at the door of the ark closed here, and this is the 7 days of waiting. Now, we weren't really expecting any particular event on November 15th. But what happened on November 15th is I awoke in the morning and I looked at the date. And when I looked at the date, I noticed the Mayan date. And the Mayan date was 130700. And I knew that this number here represents 360. And so 7 times 360 is 2520, of course. So I thought this was significant that I'd picked this date before this week, and that here it was on the Mayan calendar. But it also made me realize something that I hadn't really thought about. Because up until this time, I had understood the Mayan calendar, the beginning part of it, but I never really had looked much at what happened on December 21st, 2012. I never really thought about it. But on December 21st, 2012, something did happen. It is a very significant event. This period of 2520 days, I told my wife on November 15th, this is our 2520 anniversary because I met you on this day. I was giving a Bible study on the 2520, and she was invited by a friend who lived in her apartment to come to the study. That's where I met her. So to me, this was a very significant event. But that was a personally significant event, not necessarily worldwide significant event. At least, I don't think it is. But that to me was an important event. And so this November 15th date, I kept holding in my mind, not really understanding why it's there. What does this represent? What does November 15th represent? Now, a lot of the waymarks that we have actually dealt with an increase of light. That is, we have prophecies about light that's going to come. July 27th, October is going to be connected to October 13th. And we see that this increase of light, this is all about the prediction before midnight. This is about a prediction that's being made, which is July 18, 2020. And this prediction has been unfolding in this movement in various ways. And it was unfolding even before we realized it was unfolding. Because if you go back to all the history of the things that I was involved in, all the studies I did, every single thing that I ever presented was all about this date. I just didn't know it. Because I studied Samuel Snow's letters. I did Revelation 9. I did the 2520. I did line upon line and other things that are all connected with this, the 391.5 years of the kings of Judah. All that chronology, everything came to bear on this date here. So November 15th being for me this 2520 anniversary of meeting my wife is significant, but I'm not sure what it would mean in a worldwide context. But we're going to see that it has significance as part of a structure. And this structure is about an increase of light. So that's one of the things that we have to try to get our minds around as we're looking at these structures. It's always been about light that God is giving us. And he's giving us in a way that's unmistakable so that we can have confidence in that light. Now, I'm just going to I'm going to try to follow at least the outline that I had in these notes. Yes, this is where we're going to go next. Now, I want to look at this question about we're making a prediction, and this prediction comes after lots of other predictions, people have made all kinds of predictions about the end of the world. Now, of course, we're not predicting the end of the world. We're not predicting the second coming or any of those events directly related to the second coming. We're dealing with a prophecy that has to do with an attack upon the United States. In some ways, it is connected, obviously, with closing end-time events, but it's not telling us exactly how close we are. It's not like once we get to a certain date, we know it's this many number of days until the close of probation or anything like that. And I don't think God's going to give us that information, because Ellen White clearly says that it's best that we not have that information. It's not going to benefit us. And if people understood how we're really looking at this prophecy, because I don't know if all of us really look at it this way, but if we look at it at how we're supposed to be looking at it, we're not making a prediction that's a test. We're not telling people you have to accept this in order to be saved. This is something that we're making as a prediction that after it comes to pass, it will be a witness to the method of Bible prophecy, a Bible study that we use, just as August 11th, 1840 was a witness to the truthfulness or the correctness of Miller's method of prophetic interpretation. And so that's what we're looking at this as being about. So it's going to allow people to see that there's something about what we're saying that is true. Our main message is Daniel 11, and it's about the coming Sunday law. But that has no time attached to it. Even though we talk about December 25th, 2021 as being the Sunday law, that's just the end of our line. And we know that December 26th is a Sunday, and that's the earliest you can have a Sunday law. That is, you're not going to have the Sunday law in the United States, what we call the National Sunday Law, until after December 25th, 2021. We know that much, but we can't tell you how much after. We just know that it could be December 26th. It's possible. And so the line that's going to end, and this we deal with in some of our other studies, like on Sundays, when we're dealing with the line of the priests, to understand that the line of the priest ends December 25th, 2021. And the line is a symbolic line, that it has symbols attached to it, and it's symbolizing the larger lines. That it also has a prediction attached to it, we believe is because there is actually an event that we're predicting. And that's July 18th, but it's the only event, external event, that we're predicting. So far, we've predicted lots of events that have come true, but those events have been internal. And mostly the ones that I predicted have all been connected to an increase of light. That as I was predicting, just like Daniel was predicting, something's going to happen in regard to the message in the future. And basically this line is predicting that. It's predicting that increase of light that this message has. And that's important. But to me, it has to in some way confirm that. Now, we could argue that all the math itself is all the confirmation that we need. That is, if nothing happens on July 18th or July 31st or by December 25th, I would still not be doubting that God has led us, because I know that the math is correct and that it would just be our interpretation of what this line represents that would be the problem. But we know that this line is real. Now, and I'm betwixt and between when it comes to understanding whether July 18, 2020 will occur. To me, it doesn't make sense that it doesn't, for lots of reasons. One is it would be a witness, as I said, to the truthfulness or the correctness of our prophetic interpretation, our rules of interpretation. It would also fit in with this line as far as the message to the Levites, and it would be an impetus that would bring in many people to look seriously at this message. But we also know, not just because prophecy is fulfilled, not everybody's going to believe that we had any predictive powers in that. People can have all kinds of excuses of what we were doing. It was wrong. We were lucky. Maybe it was the Islamists decided to use that date because they saw it advertised in the Tennessean in a big one-page ad that we have. So there could be lots of arguments that people could use. But if you look at the math that we're studying here, we look at these dates and these structures, we know that this can't be coincidence. To just the structure itself and the way it is set up could not have occurred by man's production. I couldn't have dreamed this up if I tried. And even if I had a mind of a master computer, had all the minds in the world, we still wouldn't be able to create this line. This line it's unfolded by divine providence, and it's also in a way that we could never have anticipated. So we couldn't have anticipated what was happening. You couldn't have made this up. It'd just be impossible. So that's my little spiel there on that part of it. Now, what ended up happening is, in the next part of the paper, I deal with all these predictions. I deal with October 22nd. October 22nd was correct as to the time, but wrong as to the event. Now, I also deal with October 13th. Well, this isn't really a prediction, but this is the miracle of Fatima, a false prophecy connected with a date that's connected into our lines, right? We know that from October 13th. So if we put it in here, October 13th, 2018, you know, we got that 391.5 days between years. So this becomes part of our structure. We got the midnight chiasm, you know, that starts over here on June 9th, 2018. So, you know, we have this structure here, this part of the structure. So I'm just going to erase this. I don't want it in here. So we have that date. We have, of course, November 9th is another false prediction. So this is correct as to the time. We believe that this is witnessed as being correct. But the events that were predicted by Tess and Parminder were wrong. They thought Trump was going to be a dictator. They thought he'd be impeached on this date. There was all kinds of things that they believed that were going to happen on November 9th that did not occur. But we do know it became a waymark of the separation of the Alpha and the Omega groups. So November 9th by November 15th, people had basically decided which side they were on. And we haven't seen much movement of people who are on this side coming to this side or people on this side going to that side, right? So you don't have people believing in November 9th as in the way that Parminder and Tess did. Now, of course, they have all kinds of explanations about why they were wrong, but none of them are very good. Actually, I haven't really even seen anything that I could call remotely a good explanation, other than that they believe that we're in error. So they do believe that it's a separation between the two groups like we do. Now, there's another false prophecy, September 23rd. Now, of course, you know, this was October 22nd was 1844. This was 1917. This was 2019. I think it was 1917. And this was 2017. Now, this September 23rd, 2017, I do want to refer to my notes here to show you this. Oh, and the other one, of course, was December 21st, 2012. So you got that one here, December 21st, 2012. So we got these different false prophecies that have been used regarding the end of the world. So I'll just share my screen here, and got some nice graphics here as well. So since December 21st, 2012, many predictions have been made regarding the end time events. We draw your attention to a noteworthy prediction in the evangelical world, September 23rd, 2017, which was known as the Revelation 12 sign prophecy. So we're familiar with Revelation 12, verse 1 to 6. There appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pained to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So every Seventh-day Adventist knows This is a reference to the birth of Christ in 4 BC. It's understood as symbolic. The woman is Israel. The symbols are those from the Old Testament. The serpent and the woman harken back to Genesis 15, or 3:15, pardon me. The sun and the moon and the stars come from the story of Joseph, as well as the fourth day of creation. The dragon here primarily represents Satan, but also represents the acts of pagan Rome at the time of the birth of Christ. And the 1260 days are understood as 1260 years. These are first seen in Daniel 7:25 and refer to the period of papal persecution that began in the 6th century. The evangelical interpretation of this passage uses futurism. These symbols are first seen as literal. Heaven is the sky. Sun and the moon and the stars refer to the actual sun and moon and stars. The woman and the dragon are the constellations of Virgo and Draco. The 12 stars are the 9 stars of the constellation Leo, with the addition of Mercury, Venus, and Mars, that in September 2017 adorned the crown above the head of Virgo. The moon appeared under the feet of Virgo at that time, while the sun was passing through the constellation, clothing the woman. That the woman was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth was because the planet Jupiter transversed Virgo's womb after entering it on November 20th, 2016. Jupiter exited the womb approximately 42 weeks later, the maximum length of human gestation, because normally it's about 37 weeks. So I think that's, to me, a little bit of a stretch, 5 weeks late. But anyway, there was also the suggestion that the comet Borisov, dubbed the Conception Comet, entered Virgo, impregnating her 3 days before Jupiter entered Virgo's womb. This complete alignment occurred on September 23rd, 2017, over Jerusalem. This coincided with Rosh Hashanah. Now, on the Jewish calendar, they actually have Rosh Hashanah 2 days earlier. But based on the biblical calendar, the first day of the 7th month in 2017 was September 23rd, which commenced the Feast of Trumpets and marked the end of the rabbinic Jewish year 5777, sometimes abbreviated to the significant number 777. So the Jews would just call it the year 777, just like we might call it, 73 instead of 1973. So this here is this image or diagram, and I'm just going to show it here. So I'm going to go Control click, and see if that pops up properly. I probably should have opened it up earlier. Oh, there it is. Now there's 2 different diagrams here that I'm going to show you. Now you can get these on the Wikipedia page, so they're kind of cool. And so what you see here is there's the constellation Leo, and there's 9 stars in that constellation. And here we have Venus, Mars, and Mercury that are added. So you have 12 stars. This is Virgo. Now in this one you don't see Draco, but Draco's over here, the dragon. He's waiting for the child to be born. This is a new moon, so the moon is under her feet. So you see the first visible crescent. And Jupiter ended up doing this retrograde motion, so it went back and forth in Virgo's womb. And the sun, of course, is in the constellation of Virgo at that time of year. So the woman's clothed with the sun. So very interesting kind of image that you see there. And I'll show you the other one. I think if I go, anyway, the other one is the one with the, you can look on the Wikipedia site, it'll have both these diagrams, and it shows Jupiter moving back and forth between these, the womb of Virgo. So an interesting sign. Now, I go through November 9th as well, but I'm not going to go through that right now. But that's just more background information. And I do mention all of my different predictions that I made: November 22nd, 2018, April 8th, 19th, May 2nd, May 19th, October 10th, October 11th, and November 15th, all in the year 2019. And March 27 and June 27 and July 10 in the year 2020 are all other dates that I've derived or predicting that are connected with the increase of light. So people could decide whether my predictions are false and could be included in those predictions or not. So now when we deal with this 777 chiasm that we have here, and some of you have seen this before and some of you know about it, but there's a little bit more to be added. Now, what I did is I asked a simple question. We have the Levitical chiasm, right? So the Levitical chiasm was the March 27th chiasm. And then we had, more importantly, this structure of the midnight chiasm, which had the 329 days with these 63 days and this period of 126 days on either side. So this midnight chiasm and this Levitical chiasm, they obviously are showing us a structure. And this structure we can see in other places in the Old Testament. It's dealing with the story of Joseph, the two periods of 7 years and 7 years and 7 years and 7 years are connected with the story of Joseph. We see the structure in other places as well. So I just thought, well, maybe this structure can connect here. And so I just wanted to know how many days there are from December 21st, 2012, or not how many days there are. If I count 777 days, what date I would come to. And the date that I came to was February 6th, 2015. Oops. Now, of course, for most people, this would not be a significant date. But for me, it is, because this was my 52nd birthday. Now, I'm born over here on February 6th, 1963. Now, so to be 52 years old may not seem significant, but in the context of the Mayan calendar, it is, because they have a cycle of 52 years, which I'm going to go into. But this obviously is 52 solar years, and this would be a period of 18,993 days from my birth. So that's how old I was when I turned 52. But this was also significant in another way, in that I know that the Mayans also used that 360-day year. And so if I multiply 52 by 360, this would equal 18720. So that's the number we had with the name of Lamech when we multiplied his gematria. We also know it symbolizes July 18th, 2020. So that was interesting. And I wanted to know where that would fit. So if I go to February 6th, 1963, and I count 18,720 days, I come to this date. Now this is May 9th, 2014. Again, this date is not that significant to most of us, but to me it's significant. First, this would be my 33rd wedding anniversary if I had stayed married to my first wife. So it's a significance from an anniversary. It's also a symbol, 33. But more importantly, this is 273 days, and this is 504 days. So this structure here connects to this structure, because 252 and 252 together are 504, and you have 273 days. And so I could see that the beginning of this Mayan date connected to this over here. So that to me was very interesting, that this structure. So I didn't just pick any date. And the thing is, it would have to be me that would figure this out, because nobody else would they wouldn't count the 52 years. They wouldn't get this number unless they were born on my birthday. There would be no connection between February 6th and all this symbolism here. And you wouldn't get this then, the 273. So if we just had some other date, you could, or let's say we have this date, but it wasn't me who looked at it, nobody would be able to do anything with this. That is, the only person who could unlock this would be me, right? Now there's some other people born on the same day as me, but as far as in this message, there's nobody born on the same day as me that I know. It'd be very unlikely. 1 in 63,000, something like that, that there's somebody who has the same birthday as me, like the same year, that they'd be 52. So obviously I was meant to unlock this, which is very depressing that, you're this involved in something like this. But I thought about it a lot, I prayed about it a lot, and I thought, well, obviously, I'm not going to make the mistake that anybody else would make. Somehow this makes me important. I'm important already because God loves me. That's all that matters. And I don't want to be important in any other way. But I know that this is significant, that this ties me into this. And that's depressing, right? So it's very depressing to think about that where there's this personally involved with something like this. But there's other things that come from this. And some of them aren't in the paper yet. So quite interesting things, which I can probably share a little bit of. Won't be able to share everything. Now, of course, I look at these and they have this 126 days and they're divided. So these aren't divided in half. That's the interesting thing about the 7 days, is they're not really a chiasm here. This is in itself a chiasm. Now, if I put this over here, I do have a chiasm, but it's unlike this one. So I thought, well, what I need is another period of 777 days. And I wanted to see what I would get. Now, this is March 24th, 2017. Now, the significance of this is the 25th day of the 12th month. And if you look at this over here, December 25th is the 25th day of the 12th month, of course, on the Gregorian, and this is a biblical date. But I thought that was significant enough to say that this structure is solid. Now, of course, I would have to do the same thing here, because our line ends here. I'm not going to be adding, 777 days that way. And when I do this, I get September 23rd, 2017. Now, this is the Revelation 12 prophecy. So that's Revelation 12. Again, this is a false prediction. This is a false prediction. This is a false prediction. So there's two false predictions here that start each of these periods of 777 days, or each part of this chiasm. We started with an end of the world prophecy. This one, mostly a New Age one. This one, an evangelical Christian one. This one within our movement. This one's not connected, that I know of, with any prediction. And my birthday's not connected with any prediction or anything like that. But, so we have this structure. And so what I first saw is, well, these are a bunch of false predictions. Maybe it's telling us that we're making a false prediction. It seems like a strange thing that God would do, that we're using this chronology to predict something. And he's going to say, well, the very chronology you're using, I'm going to validate it by showing you that you're wrong. Seems kind of odd way to do it, because God all the way through has been showing us that we're correct. But now we would come to the point where we say, well, I did all this to show you that you're wrong. But the method that I used to show you that you were wrong is correct. So it just doesn't make sense to me that God would do it that way. But, some people may, think that that's sort of, what we're predicting is that it shows our prediction is wrong. Now, of course, we could argue that the chronology is correct, but the event that we're predicting is wrong. That would be a possibility. So, let me do that. That makes the screen bigger. Should have done that earlier. Now, one of the things about this structure is that we know that in this chiasm here, that the center of it is March 27th. Now, of course, the March 27th that it's the center of is this March 27th that begins this. So this is March 27th, 2019, and it's the center of this chiasm. And so then obviously I would want to look at the center of this. Now, this is a period of 3,291 days. So that's interesting in and of itself, is that the center of this chiasm has this period of time, which March 27th, 2019 is the center. And this is 10 times that, but with one added. And it took me some work thinking this through. Now, one of the things to figure out the center of this, and I sort of worked through it in lots of different ways, but the simple thing is that this is June 22nd on this side, and this is June 23rd on this side. That is, the center of the chiasm is midnight, ending June 22nd and beginning June 23rd. And the way that I understand it is that all of this first part of the chiasm belongs to the symbol of June 22nd. This other part of the chiasm is a different part. Now, this is, of course, 2017, because we got March 24th and September 23rd over here. Now, the interesting thing about this was June 22nd, we know is a symbol, but we haven't understood what this symbol is. Now, I have presented this other places, but we know that this symbol, I'm just going to erase this down here so I have a bit more room to write. So we know that in the history of this movement, June 22nd, 2011, was when Future for America received $165,000. And that was money to go towards the school that they were going to start. And we know that the first camp meeting that they had in Arkansas, so it wasn't at the School of the Prophets, the first camp meeting that they had in Arkansas was June 22nd, 2014. Now, I wasn't at this camp meeting, but this was the camp meeting that was connected with the opening up of Ezra 7:9. I know that Noel presented at this camp meeting. They had counted this out, right? So that they were dealing with the first day of the fifth month and the first day of the first month here in this camp meeting. And then I presented on October 20th and 21st in 2014 in the camp meeting that they had in the fall. And those camp meetings were, if I remember correctly, I should remember all these numbers, but I believe it was 126 days apart, the two camp meetings, June, July, August. Yeah, so they were 126 days apart. So there was a bunch of, or 120 days apart. There was a spring camp meeting. I don't remember it all. Anyway, forget about all that. But they had the symbol of these camp meetings. And we also use October, so we're going to put it over here, October, maybe I'll put it over here, October 22, 2014. So that becomes a significant date. Now, the thing that we didn't know is that we had October, or June 22nd, 2017 is here. So I can now add this date here. So I'm going to go June 22nd, 2017. So from here to here is 3 years, and here to here is 3 years. So we have this June 22nd chiasm. I call it the FFA chiasm, but I haven't really, there's still more that I have to dig out about this, because there's more June 22nds. And we know that June 27th is 6:22 a.m. That's when Enoch is born. July 18th, 622 AD. That's the start of the Islamic calendar. And we know that 622 BC and 627 BC are connected in the prophecy of Ezekiel. So there's a bunch of symbolism here. But the thing is, June 22nd, these dates have been pointed out by Jeff. And then what I noticed is that there's a date in between these two dates. And the date in between June 22nd, 2011 and June 22nd, 2014 is December 21st, 2012. That is the start of the Mayan calendar. So one of the things that we get as we start to look at these structures is they're all interlocked as wheels within wheels. And so, I had marked December 21st on November 15th. So before that, I never really noticed this date, that it had any significance, until November 15th with this 2520. But now we have a second witness, well, many, many witnesses, but a second witness as far as structurally relating to June 22nd. So we can see that this is part of this structure. 548 days and 548 days. Now, December 21st, 2012 then is now interlocked with this whole message in multiple ways. Now, since this is the center of the chiasm, this part here is the June 22nd part, and this is after June 22nd. This is a separation that occurs within the message itself. And we know that there was, of course, a separation in 2014 that happened way back here, probably around this time that it was occurring. Ezra 7:9 was actually understood in 2013. But as we move through this history, this is FFA, and now here they're going to begin organization. So this is what this history is about here. This is the transition from FFA just being a ministry. It's building up this ministry, but now they're going to start a worldwide organization. And this is going to happen in September of 2017, that they have meetings in Romania to begin an organization. So I think they end on September 11th. So we have, this change that occurs here. And this change is important because now as we start to organize, we end up splitting into two groups, the true priest and the false priest. Now, of course, this started in a sense back here, but it's here where it's manifest in this history. And we see November 9th as a separation between these two groups. So again, there's a lot more detail that can be brought out. The paper brings out a lot more detail. But I want to address a little bit further November 9th or November 15th. So I noticed that if I count from November 15th to 264 days, I come to August 5th, 2020. Now, August 5th, 2020 doesn't mean anything to me. That is, all it is 264 days from November 15th. But if I count another 264 days, I come to April 26th, 2021. Now, of course, this is a symbol of the 26th day of the fourth month. It's a symbol of 264. Now, I noticed over here, if I counted here, 126 days from December 21st, 2012, I come to April 26th, 2013. So I already have this April 26th here at the beginning. And so we have a number of symbols that are all interlocked with each other. We have April 26th. We have March 27th. We have June 22nd. And these I would call our main symbols. Well, I'd probably write it more like this, the 26th day of the fourth month. Now we could also argue the 10th day of the fifth month, 105. We could also say 622. So that could be the 6th month, 22nd day, but we'll just use it as the symbol 622. Of course, we have July 18th, 187. We have 252 and 126. But we have all these different symbols, and some of them are represented as dates. This can be represented as a date as well. So it could be lots of different ways in which that's done. February 5th, 2020 was connected to this, 2520. Obviously July 18th, June 22nd. So we have all these different symbols, and they are part of a structure of interlocking numbers and dates. Now, somebody said to me once, well, the more symbols you have, the more chances you're going to have things align. Well, that was true. If every number was a symbol, you would just see, every time you see a number, you would think, oh, well, that means this and that means that. But we don't actually have tons of symbols. We have a few. But we'll also have structure. And structure is something that testifies, that brings several symbols together in a way that's mathematically extremely unlikely. So, for instance, if you analyze this here, and you look at my birthday, and it's 52 years, and then I count, well, the actual, the 52 prophetic years go to here, but this is my actual birthday. and that it's 273 days apart, and that it produces this number, 18720, for this date, May 9th. Just you start to see the problem with somebody saying, well, the more symbols you have, the more likelihood, because they actually all have to fit together in a structure. And so the more pieces you have of a puzzle, the more complicated it is. So let's say we had one symbol, and the one symbol was September 11th. We used to have that as a long time as a symbol. Well, you'd look at your clock and you see it's 9:11 in the morning, for almost every morning. And so you could say, well, that's an interesting coincidence. But if you have multiple symbols and they all show up together at the same time as part of a structure, well, that's much more unlikely. So an example, Kelly had deposited 2 checks. One was $525 and the other was $252. And they added up to $777. And of course, we know that if we take this here, 252 and 273, those together are 525, and this is 252. And so we had these 2 checks, and this is how Stephen Jameson originally looked at this as 525, and this is 252. And so 252 plus 525 is 777. Now, the question is, how likely is this? So I did the mathematical calculations. I can't remember what they were, but it was highly unlikely. Now, if I just had the symbol of 777, what's the chances that I'm going to deposit a couple of checks and they'll add up to 777? Well, it's going to happen. But to only deposit 2 checks and that they add up to 777, that becomes extremely unlikely that you're going to have this coincidence. And so you can figure it out mathematically, and I did. So it's very unlikely. I can't remember. It's something like 22 million to 1 odds, something like that. So it's very, very unlikely. Kelly will never have this happen again. And if he does, he would know that it's not a mere coincidence, that would actually create way more unlikely that it would have happened twice. You would have to multiply that by itself to get so you'd have something with 22, I can't remember, whatever the number of zeros were, you just double those number of zeros. So anyway, which makes the number a lot larger. It's not twice as big. So anyway, we see that as we get more and more complexity, we have something that's actually more and more unlikely. So if you found a perfectly round rock, perfect is relative, but that would be very unlikely. But if you found, you found this line in the sand, but next to it, you found a watch. Now you could argue that the rock nobody made it, it just came about through erosion, but you couldn't argue that about the watch because it's too complex. This is exactly what we see in this prediction. We have something that is so complex, so interconnected in so many different ways that it's extremely unlikely, much more than all the particles of the universe to 1 odds. So, we know it's real. The question is, are we correct in our interpretation and understanding of it? Now, I've thought about this a bit. And, so for many of us, we just think, well, we need to accept it. One is we do need to warn the people in Nashville from what we expect to happen. Even if we're wrong, it's better to warn them and be wrong than to not warn them and be wrong, right? Because that's a responsibility that God has given us, to warn people. Now, there's always this worry about, well, what if we have this wrong prediction and somebody believes this message because of the prediction and then it doesn't happen and then they lose their faith? Well, then probably their faith wasn't very well founded to begin with. Because if they're carefully looking at what we're doing, they know that we can be wrong, that's not what this is about. It's not about being right. It's about seeing what God has revealed and understanding it. That's the important part to me about what we're studying. It's understanding how God has led and trying to understand as we go through this history, what these events mean as they unfold. I still expect the attack on Nashville on July 18th, 2020. I would count on it. But I also know that it could not happen. It's possible that it may not happen. That is always a possibility, because there may be something that I don't understand. And the fact that there's something I don't understand is always a possibility. It's always a great possibility. That's the thing that always keeps me looking for more light, because I know I don't understand everything. And I'm willing to be made a fool or to look a fool if it means that I'm going to get more light, if God's going to give me more understanding. And even if that's understanding about myself and who I am, I'm willing to look at that. This is not about, creating some new movement so people can follow us and worship us or whatever, so that we can somehow be important. That's not what this is about. This is about a search for truth. And since God has led in it, I believe that however it turns out will always be for good. And so I have complete confidence in God and how he has led. I just don't have confidence in myself, in my ability to understand truth. Now, so there's a lot more in the paper, but I just want to show you what I found this morning, or last night technically, but I worked on it a bit more this morning. Now, I've looked at a number of birthdays. So one is, my birthday is in here. But I was also looking at Trump. Now we know that Trump was born on June 14th, 1946. And that when he came to office, he was 70 years, 7 months, and his 7th day of life when he was inaugurated. So it's very interesting that you have this 777 connected with Trump. We also see, of course, the 777 connected with that prediction in 2017. That ends the Jewish year 5777, and we know that Trump came into office in the Jewish year 5777. So that Jewish year was 777. So lots of 777 coincidences with Trump, a lot more than I could explain here. Now, one of the things I noticed though is I put Trump's birthday into my calendar converter, and I just wanted to know how many days he was from some of these events. So I know the calendar converter, if I try to blow it up, it doesn't really work too well on the computer. I probably should have taken a snapshot of it. I might not even have this on here now. But one of the waymarks that I always put into the calendar converter, there's a few that I put in. I always put December 21st, 2012. And I always put September 11th, 2001. And look at connections of spans of time with that date. And all kinds of things have come up with September 11th. I haven't actually even written a paper on it. There's just so many things regarding September 11th, how we can see that fits into the structure of the chronology. But I found it was interesting that when I looked from his birthday, and of course we know September 11th, 2001 is an important day for Trump. He was there, he was helping, he was in New York, that's his city, and this was something that actually a lot of people saw in Trump something that they hadn't seen before, not just a businessman, but somebody who cared. And actually the press was really good about Trump in 2001, the things that he did for New York after 9/11. But the number of days from Trump's birthday to 9/11 is this number. So 9/11 is way over here. Trump's way over here. So I'm not going to put it in this line per se. I'll just draw it down here. So you got Trump over here. He's born June 14th, 1946. And here's September 11th. There's 9/11. And the number of days is 20,178. Now, it would be really nice, if this was 20,187, you would say, well, that's year 2020. That would be the 18th day, the 7th month or whatever. or if it was, 2817 or something like that. Well, that's the interesting thing about this, is this number here, 18720, is 5 digits. And these can be arranged roughly in 50 different ways, a combination of 50 different ways that I can arrange these 5 digits. So over the span of 87,210 days, I have 50 possible combinations of these 5 digits. So it's not very likely. It's actually one in every 7 years or something that I would have one of these combinations, something like that. Maybe it's one in every 71 years. So it's very unlikely that you're going to have this combination of numbers. So the interesting thing was, I also looked at from his birthday to different things on the line, but the other one that came up was this one, November 15th, 2019. So this was just a different combination. This was 27,000, um, 100, or 20,000, I think at 81. 27,081, if I remember. Yeah. To this, not to November 15th. That's wrong. This is 264 days from November 15th to August 5th. August 5th, 2020. So this is 2019. And so this was the first time I had a second witness for August 5th, 2020. Now, so this is just me imagining, maybe I shouldn't even put this on a recording, but I've looked ahead at the scenario of what could happen. So we have some time coming up, June 27th, which is 21 days before July 18th. And we have some other dates coming up, July 4th, July 10th, and then of course we have July 18th. And then we have July 31st. And on the 26th day of the 4th month, which is July 18th, we expect a nuclear attack on Nashville by Islam. And then on July 31st, which is July 18th Julian, which is the 10th day of the 5th month on the biblical calendar, certain of the elders of Israel will come and sit before us to inquire of the Lord. And we're going to have to tell them that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, because that's the message Ezekiel gives on that date. Now, what happens after that? So you have this attack, and I don't know how fast the American, spy system works, and how much they're going to know what's going to happen, and how they're going to connect who's responsible and who knew about this event. But this is what I envision. So it might just me being silly, but I'm serious about it. It's not a topic I'd like to treat that seriously, because it's a little bit scary. But if I take this date, and I have now this date connected with me, August 5th, and I have Trump's connected with it, my question is, maybe this is the day that I end up being brought before, to the Pentagon and having to explain how we predicted July 18, 2020, to President Trump and his advisors or something. I don't know. But all I do know is that for me personally, there seems to be a lot of attachment to that date, to the August 5th, 2020 date. Now, I'm not sure, I haven't examined it all that much. I spent a little bit of time this morning looking over this. So I actually created a chart. One of the interesting things is that my 52nd birthday is what's important in this chiasm here. But I also noticed that Ronald Reagan, who has the same birthday as me, I was born on his 52nd birthday. And we know we have Reagan at the beginning of the time of the end, and we have Trump at the end. And so there's definitely some connection between Reagan and Trump. And I put Reagan's numbers on this chart. So it's on a spreadsheet, Excel, and my birthdays and all the countings of all the numbers, all the way up to 87,210 and days. And then I put all these birthdays on and showed how they lined up. And there's a whole bunch of lineups with August 5th, and some with June 22nd, some with some other ones, that these permutations line up from these birthdays. Something that's extremely unlikely. And I plan to put in some other important people in there that I would think would matter. Maybe George Washington's birthday might yield something as well. But it's just kind of interesting that, God is giving us this information regarding this prediction. And it starts to become very, very personal. And we start to see that, everybody's life, everybody who has a part to play in history, even in the little ways that we do, we're all part of this structure that God has made. And I think the main lesson I learned from that is I'm comforted by it. Heidi and I are very comforted by the fact that God has led us this far, and that no matter what comes, that he will continue to be with us, and that it's not about being right or being wrong in that sense of how the world would see it. It's about just accepting what God shows us and following wherever he leads. And he definitely has led. It's not something that we've manufactured. It hasn't been contrived in any way. Somebody looking at it on the outside who doesn't understand it might think, oh, you chose these dates but the dates were chosen. The analysis comes after the fact. So the dates are produced by prophecy. And then we analyze them and we start to see these coincidences. We don't use these dates to create our dates, right? We don't just pick these dates to fit these analysis. The dates come first, the analysis comes after. And a great example is the June 22nd, where we see from June 22nd, 2011 to June 22nd, 2014, that the center of that is December 21st, 2012. We just wouldn't have imagined it. Now, if we had picked those dates and, for some reason, and they're sort of arbitrary, we just think, oh, well, this date was important, Jeff did something, this date was important, something happened. But they were the dates that were picked. They weren't something that, we're picking out of a bunch of things and we like those dates. Those dates just happened to be there. Jeff noticed that they were both June 22nd, and I was studying June 22nd at the same time, the 622. So it was kind of interesting, but we didn't know that they would then confirm the Mayan calendar, that it's part of this structure. So we have the midnight chiasm, the Levitical chiasm, we have what I call the FFA part of the chiasm, but this whole 777 chiasm. So we have that June 22nd, the FFA chiasm, the Levitical chiasm for the March 27th, the November 9th structure, is the midnight chiasm. And so now we have this 777 chiasm. So it just seems to me that God is showing us things, and why he's showing them to us has to be for our benefit and also for the benefit of others. He's not just doing this, to tickle our intellect and entertain us. And so it's very serious stuff, and it should give us reason to really examine, who we are, and that's what we're trying to do. So I actually have a few comments. Well, at least I have one. Charles raised his hand, so Chuck. So you have a comment that you would like to make?
Yes, I would like to read a verse
Okay.
regarding July 18, Ezekiel 19:12. But she was plucked up in fury. She was cast down to the ground, and the east wind dried up her fruits. Her strong rods were broken and withered. The fire consumed them. Now, what I've been given, God and I talk a lot, is that when Methuselah goes through the front door of the Parthenon, the nuclear trigger doesn't go off, it spreads U-235 all around, makes the water bitter. It's just a puff of smoke, but the radiation is present because the yellow cake is everywhere.
Okay.
So is that going to be, everybody's worried about this disappointment. The fact that it's a nuclear attack and the warhead doesn't go off, but it spreads stuff all over the ground. It, according to the verse, goes down to the ground and the east wind dries up. There's no big tower of smoke. There's just U-235 everywhere.
Yeah, well, the thing though, we do have Ellen White's vision of the destruction of Nashville. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but there's too many evidence showing that it is an actual, ball of fire.
Well, the fallout's there. It's just that the fire coming out of heaven interferes with the explosion. It's got its own really bad explosions.
Yeah. Well, you may be right. I don't know. All I'm saying is I can't decide whether you're correct or not. I mean, that's the thing is as events unfold, we'll see kind of what happens.
Okay, one more thing.
Yeah.
And this has to do with the word POTS, P-O-T-S.
Yeah, POTS.
Were there satellites around the world when God threw rocks at Sodom and Gomorrah? No.
No.
We hadn't thought of that yet. But we've got satellites all over and I did a search. What would happen to these? Well, there's all kinds of papers on the chain reaction that takes place all over the planet.
Yeah.
I'm going to be on my rooftop. I'm going to be on my rooftop come July 18 because if the Lord's throwing rocks at this place, it's going to take down. And Ellen White even mentions, well, the Bible mentions this as well, that these pots that everybody depends on, cell phones, internet, that we're talking on right now,
yeah,
is going to come down. In the Bible, the pots are first brought up in the designing all the precious pots out of brass and everything that in the temple.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody depended on these things.
Well, yeah, and you bring up an important point because one of the things that's always bothered me my whole life is how complicated the world is, how interdependent we are on each other. I don't like being dependent upon other people. I'd love to be living in the bush somewhere, living just basic, primitive, knowing that when I eat, it's dependent upon my hard work. But we live in this infrastructure that exists, and it's a very fragile infrastructure. The power grid is fragile. The information grid is fragile, and of course, people in the higher ups know this, and they're doing everything they can to try to make sure that there's a redundant system so that if something does go wrong, they can correct things quickly. But we do know that if an attack happens, no matter what happens, it changes the world. If there's a nuclear attack in the United States, whether your way of understanding it is correct or not. Okay. So
let me say this. Just coincidentally, I came out of a heart surgery not long ago.
Yeah.
My wife insisted that I wear an eye watch. Now, I don't know if y'all have ever seen one. It's crazy magic or something. It can take my EKG. It can call it, it'll if I fall down, I go walk about. I live on the edge of Anchorage. I can walk 15 minutes and I'm in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I go walk about a lot, and she worries about me disappearing in the trees or something like that. So this crazy phone will contact. If I fall down, I don't get up. It says, "Hey, Chuck, you fell down. You're not getting up." I'm calling the cops. I'm calling an ambulance, and they're gonna bring a box out here and put you in it and take you home. So she sleeps better now, but
Yeah.
this thing ain't going to work after July 18th.
Yeah, well, I guess. So you won't be able to go for long walks. But
Well, the Lord's seen to that. I can go for long walks. He took my truck away.
oh,
I caved in the right front door not long ago.
okay. Okay. Well, anyway, Chuck, we're
Carry a stick.
just
You know,
going
I
off
carry
track here. So anyway, we're gonna come to your stuff. We're gonna spend some time looking at your stuff later on. Not today, but I promise we will take a look at it. Now, I just need to take, one is I have to sift through your material, and it's very metaphorical, and that becomes hard for me to understand what you're saying sometimes. But anyway, you can see.
Yeah, my plate's really full too.
Yeah.
I've got Levites coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah, and so we see that God is working right now. We can see that He's given us more and more light. We're going to find out what it all means as time goes on. I still think that we're going to get a lot more light before July 18th. But it's important for us to study and understand and to share this information with others. So anyway, I just want to close with prayer, and then we can say our goodbyes. So let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the time that we've had here this evening. Thank you for the Sabbath hours that are coming. Some already are in the Sabbath. And we just ask, Lord, that you can continue to be with us and teach us. I pray for each person watching these videos and participating and searching for truth. We give our lives into your hands, and we just ask that you can use us to your glory. And we pray and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.